stop what you're doing for a second. Because if the room feels different lately, if people talk to you sideways, if old dynamics suddenly don't work anymore, that's not random, and it's definitely not in your head. Something changed before anyone said anything, and the unsettling part is this: you're the reason. Not because you became louder, but because you became harder to predict. Power doesn't usually fight what threatens it. It studies it. It models it. It forecasts it. For a long time, you were readable, easy to map, easy to manage, easy to slot into other people's expectations. And that's why the world around you felt stable, even when it wasn't fair. But the moment your internal alignment shifted, your boundaries, your timing, your emotional consistency, you broke the pattern they were unconsciously using to navigate you. And when predictability disappears, people don't panic openly. They adjust quietly. They test limits. They project discomfort. They move opportunities around without explaining why. This is why things suddenly feel off. Not worse, just unfamiliar. And that unfamiliarity isn't chaos, it's recalibration. Here's what nobody tells you. Most control in this world doesn't come from force, threats, or confrontation. It comes from silent agreements you were never told you signed. Agreements like, don't rock the boat, don't outgrow the room, don't disrupt emotional comfort, don't change too fast, don't become unpredictable. These rules aren't written anywhere, which is why breaking them feels like you did something wrong even when you didn't. Psychologically, this happens because humans internalize norms long before they ever question them. We learn early that approval feels safer than isolation, that harmony feels better than honesty, that predictability feels easier than growth. Over time, you stop needing permission to shrink. You do it automatically. You edit yourself before anyone else has to. And that's the most dangerous kind of control. The kind that doesn't feel like control at all. It feels like normal life. Routine. Just how things are. Until one day you stop playing along without even realizing you stopped. And suddenly everything around you feels unstable. This is also why most people never realize they're being strategically managed, because nobody sits down and plots it. It emerges naturally. Human brains love efficiency, and once your reactions become consistent, people unconsciously build systems around you. Who absorbs stress without complaining? Who over-explains? Who hesitates before asserting themselves? Who waits for permission instead of moving? None of this requires malice, just repetition. Over time, comfort forms around your predictability, and comfort hates disruption. So when you change, people don't think they're growing. They feel something's wrong. Not because you harmed them, but because you stopped being easy to navigate. And that's when resistance shows up disguised as confusion, distance, passive tension, or sudden shifts in energy that no one names out loud. What's actually happening underneath is a containment structure, not a destruction plan. Most systems don't want you gone. They want you manageable. And they do that through three quiet forces that don't feel like control at all: dependence, distraction, and delay. Dependence ties your confidence to approval, access, or validation. Distraction keeps your attention busy but unfocused, scrolling, reacting, surviving, but never building. Delay keeps your goals perpetually postponed. Someday, later, after this settles down, once things feel right. Behavioral science shows that when people are dependent, overstimulated, and always waiting, they don't rebel. They stall. They don't plan. They cope. They don't leave. They linger. And the wild part is this: nobody has to trap you when the structure itself keeps you tired enough to stay. But the moment you reduce dependence, simplify focus, and compress timelines, the entire geometry collapses. Control only works when you remain inside its shape. And that's why the environment around you feels unstable right now. Not because you're losing ground, but because you stepped outside the pattern that made you easy to contain. Calm, clarity, and consistency don't just change your internal world. They destabilize external systems that were built around your old reactions. That's why responsibility starts finding you before recognition does. That's why isolation often comes before expansion. That's why growth feels lonely before it feels powerful. You're no longer reacting. You're moving differently. And systems can't manage what they can't predict. Now listen closely, because this is the part that changes how you move forward. You don't need confrontation. You don't need explanations. You don't need validation. You need alignment. When your actions match your standards, when your timing matches your priorities, when your energy stops leaking. And after that undeniability comes something even quieter: certainty. Not the loud, performative kind. The calm, grounded kind that doesn't need to convince anyone, because it finally doesn't need permission. You stop asking yourself if you're allowed to want what you want. And that internal shift changes the way you move, the way you speak, the way you choose, the way you tolerate. You don't force endings, but you stop prolonging what no longer fits. You don't chase beginnings, but you stop resisting them. The nervous system relaxes because it no longer has to brace for the same cycles repeating. You're not running anymore, you're redirecting. And that difference changes everything. This is where life begins responding differently to you. Not because the world suddenly became kinder, but because your signal changed. You're no longer broadcasting survival. You're broadcasting stability. You're no longer operating from depletion, uncertainty, or fear of loss. You're operating from self-trust. And self-trust is magnetic. It reorganizes timelines. It attracts opportunities that don't require self-betrayal. It aligns you with people who don't need convincing. It opens doors that don't demand exhaustion as the entry fee. Things stop feeling like uphill battles and start feeling like momentum. Not because effort disappears, but because resistance does. You're no longer dragging your future behind you. You're finally walking with it. And when that happens, progress feels less like strain and more like flow. Less like forcing and more like arriving. What's especially powerful about this phase is how subtle the transformation looks from the outside, while feeling seismic on the inside. You might still wake up in the same room, go to the same places, talk to the same people, but the internal posture is different. You're no longer bracing against life. You're meeting it. You're no longer shrinking to fit spaces. You're expanding into them. You're no longer asking, "What should I do?" You're asking, "What's true?" And truth moves faster than strategy. Truth simplifies decisions. Truth shortens timelines. Truth dissolves the need to overthink because it doesn't argue. It resonates. This is the stage where alignment replaces anxiety, not because fear vanished, but because direction finally arrived. And once direction is clear, fear loses its leverage. It no longer gets to run the room. It becomes background noise instead of the narrator. And that's the real shift. Not that your life suddenly becomes easy, but that it finally becomes honest. You stop living in reaction and start living in response. You stop negotiating with fear and start moving with truth. You stop waiting for permission and realize it was never required. What's opening now isn't just a door, it's a trajectory. A future that no longer demands you shrink, delay, perform, or survive your way forward. You're not stepping into chaos. You're stepping into coherence. And once coherence locks in, life doesn't fight you. It organizes around you. This is the chapter where your energy stops leaking, your direction stops wavering, and your spirit stops questioning whether it's allowed to want more. You're not late. You're not behind. You're not missing anything. You're exactly on time for the life that finally fits you. And from this point forward, movement isn't forced. It's natural. Because when alignment becomes your baseline, momentum becomes inevitable. God, Source, Universe, whatever name reaches you from this place, I ask for clarity where there has been confusion, peace where there has been pressure, and strength where there has been silent exhaustion. Release what no longer belongs to me, and return what I lost while trying to survive instead of live. Realign my steps with truth instead of fear, with integrity instead of habit, with courage instead of comfort. Let the doors that no longer serve my growth close without grief, and the ones meant for me open without resistance. Teach me to trust what feels right, even when it feels unfamiliar, and to walk forward without shrinking, apologizing, or doubting my worth. May my energy stabilize, my mind clear, my heart stay open, and my life finally move in the direction my soul has always recognized as home. Amen. If this message resonated, don't ignore it. That's alignment tapping you on the shoulder. Like this, subscribe, and stay here if you're ready to move into the version of yourself your future already knows. And in the comments, write, I choose alignment. Say it. Claim it. Because momentum doesn't start with motion. It starts with decision. When pain is integrated instead of denied, it becomes resolve. This isn't about becoming ruthless. It's about reclaiming energy that used to disappear into doubt, appeasement, and self-negotiation. Dark motivation isn't explosive. It's grounded. It doesn't chase validation. It chases alignment. And once harnessed, it creates a level of consistency that doesn't burn out because it's built on truth instead of performance. Detachment is another word people misunderstand. They think it means withdrawal. It doesn't. In psychology and philosophy, detachment means freedom from emotional entanglement, not freedom from life. When you stop tying your identity to outcomes, reactions, or approval, you didn't lose care, you gained leverage. Stoicism, Eastern philosophy, and modern neuroscience converge here. Attachment amplifies suffering and weakens agency. Detachment doesn't numb emotion. It prevents emotion from hijacking judgment. And that creates a rare strength, calm under pressure. From the outside, it looks like confidence. From the inside, it feels like relief. You're no longer fighting to be understood. You're no longer negotiating your worth. You're simply acting from alignment. And that internal elevation changes every interaction that follows. This is how status actually reverses, not through dominance, confrontation, or proving anything, but through perception. When your internal state stabilizes, calm, clarity, consistency, others unconsciously adjust how they treat you. Neuroscience calls this mirror neuron recalibration. People respond to energy before they respond to words. When your presence stabilizes, it signals authority without you saying anything. Behavioral studies show that subtle shifts in posture, tone, pacing, and emotional regulation change dynamics faster than argument ever could. Once your old predictability disappears, assumptions collapse. Peers reassess. Superiors hesitate. Even those who tried to limit you pause. This doesn't happen instantly, but it happens inevitably. When the internal shift is sustained, the external world reorganizes around your true capacity instead of your former constraints. That's the quiet revolution of power. It starts in perception, not confrontation. This is also why people suddenly become curious, nervous, or respectful around you, and none of them can explain why. Behavioral psychology explains this through cognitive dissonance. When someone's internal model of you no longer matches your reality, tension forms. Their attempts to predict you fail. Their influence loses accuracy, and uncertainty forces observation. You'll notice subtle changes, different tone, more careful wording, hesitation before criticism, a pause where there used to be pressure. These aren't coincidences. They're confirmation that your internal work is producing measurable external effects. Recognition doesn't come from effort. It comes from alignment. Power doesn't announce itself. It reorganizes rooms quietly. And here's where leverage actually compounds, not through confrontation, but through structure. Selective availability signals boundaries without debate. Slower response timing communicates thoughtfulness and authority. Strategic silence often outperforms explanation. Applied psychology shows that nonverbal cues, tone, posture, pacing, presence, are processed subconsciously and shape behavior faster than logic ever could. When you structure your presence deliberately, even in small ways, manipulation weakens and competence perception rises. These effects stack. Each subtle choice reinforces the next. Over weeks, your energy, rhythm, and focus begin broadcasting authority without words. You stop being the negotiable variable. You become the reference point. Calm, in this context, becomes a weapon, not because it's aggressive, but because it's unexpected. Reactive people, manipulative systems, and emotional dynamics all rely on predictable cues. When they try to provoke tension and receive composure instead, the feedback loop collapses. The energy they use to guide your behavior is no longer available. Neuroscience explains this through dominance of the prefrontal cortex over the amygdala. Decision replaces reaction. And once that happens consistently, people lose leverage over you. Not because you became cold, but because you became sovereign. This calm isn't passive, it's active control, refined presence. And paradoxically, it creates both deeper connection and stronger boundaries at the same time. Now here's the part almost nobody talks about. The moment you step out of the psychological or social role you've always occupied, you create a vacuum. Systems, organizations, and relationships are built around predictable participants. When one suddenly stops feeding the pattern, the structure destabilizes, not into chaos, into exposure. The space you leave unsettles routines and reveals hidden dependencies. Organizational psychology shows that when a compliant participant disengages, even subtly, ripple effects cascade across entire systems. Gaps appear, weak points surface, control structures become visible. This is why manipulators fear withdrawal more than confrontation. Confrontation energizes systems. Withdrawal destabilizes them. The vacuum you create isn't empty. It's a spotlight. And as pressure builds around your absence, your perceived value rises automatically. The world begins to notice what it used to take for granted. And as you evolve, one response shows up almost every time: projection. When people feel threatened, insecure, or destabilized by your growth, they unconsciously assign those emotions to you. Criticism appears, doubt surfaces, unsolicited advice floods in, not because of your behavior, but because of their discomfort. Projection is the brain's way of protecting identity. When your advancement challenges their internal story, I'm secure, I'm competent, I'm in control, tension forms. And instead of confronting themselves, they redirect that discomfort outward. Understanding this changes everything. You stop internalizing reactions that were never about you. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. And you realize that growth doesn't just elevate you. It destabilizes anyone who relied on your former position. And that's when the real shift happens. Not when they change, but when you stop needing them to. When people sense your growth, they don't always celebrate it. Sometimes they defend against it. Not consciously, not maliciously, but instinctively. Your progress destabilizes the version of reality they've grown comfortable with. And instead of adjusting inward, they often reinterpret your evolution as threat. That's why support can quietly turn into tension, encouragement into criticism, familiarity into distance, But the moment you recognize projection, its power evaporates. You stop absorbing emotional reactions that were never about you and start seeing discomfort for what it really is, the edge of someone else's limits. This awareness protects your stability and becomes something even more useful: a navigation system. It shows you who can grow alongside you and who can only tolerate you when you remain smaller. In that sense, resistance becomes data, not pain, not betrayal. Data. Every time you shift internally, the external world enters a recalibration phase, whether you intend it to or not. Psychologically, systems don't resist change. They resist unpredictability. And when your presence no longer fits the role they built around you, friction appears. Old hierarchies wobble, expectations glitch, interactions lose their automatic rhythm. This tension isn't dysfunction, it's restructuring. Social science shows that whenever identity or relational patterns change, temporary instability is unavoidable. The system must renegotiate where you fit now that you no longer match the old blueprint. That's why your calm can provoke confusion, why your boundaries can trigger subtle pushback, why your silence can feel louder than your words ever were. This discomfort isn't danger, it's evidence. Evidence that outdated control patterns are loosening and new influence is forming. The worst move here is retreat. The smartest move is steadiness. Stay aligned, stay consistent. Let the recalibration complete itself. Friction is not failure. It's the sound of leverage shifting. Once your energy changes, your environment will test you. Not dramatically, not obviously, but persistently. The tests arrive as subtle pressures, unexpected resistance, minor provocations, or situations designed to see whether your shift is real or temporary. This isn't personal, it's systemic. Behavioral science shows that systems probe for stability after disruption, the same way muscles test load after injury. People push gently against new boundaries to see if they hold. And here's the advantage. When you remain composed, consistent, and self-directed, the tests stop testing you and start revealing others. You see who respects your evolution, who resists it, who adapts, and who hopes you revert. You don't pass these tests by explaining yourself. You pass them by not changing. Each moment of steadiness reinforces credibility, independence, and authority. The kind that can't be manufactured, only earned through alignment.